As a Scotsman, I'm very used to supporting the underdog. But also, as any Scottish sports fan will tell you, the underdog normally loses. And as Scots, we put ourselves through these numerous false dawns and glorious defeats, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. That's how the underdog story normally goes. And certainly when it comes time to US presidential elections, we don't really see an underdog story. Normally what happens in an election, there's a clear front runner. They're always the front runner. When the final polls come in, they've usually won a pretty comprehensive victory. If you look at something like Reagan versus Carter or Obama versus McCain, the result never really ends up in much doubt. Alternatively, you have a knife edge election where it is so close to call and you don't know who the final winner is going to be. Something like Kennedy and Nixon or Bush and Gore. What we see in this election is a clear frontrunner. It never looks like it's going to be in doubt. There's never any momentum that moves away from the frontrunner. If anything, the underdog experiences something that looks like the nail in their coffin, yet they still win. That's what happens in the 2016 US election when Trump pulls off what's probably the biggest upset in US political history ever, certainly in presidential elections. But how does it come about? Let's look at a couple of key factors leading through this election and ultimately leading up to the inauguration speech that we're going to be looking at. So the first thing to consider is Trump really identifies in this election that any publicity is good publicity. And this is not the approach that politicians have taken up until this point. They want the publicity, but they want it carefully spun and scripted. Trump goes into this election going, if I can get myself in front of eyeballs, I'm going to get that recognition and I'm going to be on people's minds. So he has to face a contested primary election. There's several different candidates who go throughout the primaries. There's also the Democratic primaries going on at the same time. Yet despite all the candidates across both parties, a 2018 study found that Trump managed to secure about $2 billion of free airtime. $2 billion. And another study found that out of all the election candidates across the entire political campaign, Trump received 25% of the media coverage. Now that's not when it's him and Hillary Clinton going toe to toe. This is everyone who ever runs for president in the 2016 cycle. There are over a dozen candidates and Trump gets a quarter of the total airtime. So Trump really identified that getting visibility was a key part of how he was going to give himself a chance in this election. Another thing that Trump did strategically well was really nailing down his messaging and his branding. The slogan of "Make America Great Again" came across very early, and it was something that he was able to build his entire rhetoric around. And ultimately, when he came up against Hillary Clinton, the messaging and the slogans was something that Clinton really struggled with. There was these slogans of "I'm with her," Pokemon Go to the polls. Do you remember Pokemon Go? Which I think is a terrible slogan. Whereas Trump had his "Make America Great Again" brand, and he came up with all of these catchy rhetoric slogans, things like "Build a Wall," "Drain the Swamp." He had nicknames. He had "Crooked Hillary," he had "Lying Ted." So Trump was really expert in managing his rhetoric and his messaging and his branding in this political election. But yet, despite all of that, Clinton still has a really big lead. When they go in the head-to-head debates, there's nothing that happens in the debates that suggests that Trump is going to gain any momentum. When you do all the polls across all the different outlets, liberal, conservative, centrist, polls were consistently showing that between 10 and 20% of people thought that Hillary had done better than Trump, or should I say, there was a 10 to 20% difference in who they thought had won the election. So Clinton had these huge leads in the debate of people thinking that she had performed better, again, across the political spectrum. Trump has a real nail in the coffin when the grab them by the pussy audio tape comes out. And that just seems to be the final thing that's going to turn people off. He's up against a female candidate. Members of the Republican Party go, that's us blowing any chances that we have. Even certain members of Trump's team, even reportedly Trump himself, felt that that was the thing that was going to torpedo his election. We come to election night. All the polls are suggesting a clear win for Clinton. Trump himself doesn't think that he's going to win. He books a small hotel ballroom because he's expecting to make a concession speech, and he doesn't want this big empty auditorium with him talking about being the loser. So he books out this tiny venue and he expects to make a very quiet concession piece and slide off when the election results get announced. But that's not what happens. As the results come in, a few shocks occur. And in particular, the key to Trump's election victory seems to be the 3 Rust Belt states. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin all flip, traditionally Democrat states, they flip to Trump, and the combined total is less than 80,000 votes. 80,000 votes across those 3 states give Trump the electoral college maths. This is something that always happens in presidential elections, is people start playing the electoral college maths. And it's those 3 states that gives Trump the equation that allows him to jump over, secure the presidency. One of the big upsets in history. Loses the popular vote by a significant margin. Hillary Clinton ends up getting 3 more total votes. But that's not the rules of the game that they're playing. The rules of the game are not who can get the most votes. The rules of the game are who can get the most votes where it counts. And right through his campaigning, Trump has had a clear idea of who he's trying to target, whose votes that he's trying to win. And a lot of it is that white, working class, non-educated, semi-skilled manual workers, exactly the type of people who live in those Rust Belt states. In fact, can you hear the Rust Belt states at the moment? There's some massive machinery going on outside my window. I don't know what that is. A little bit of atmospheric ambiance to talk about winning votes in Rust Belt states. So Trump manages to win the election. And now he's got to look at, well, what does my inauguration speech look like? It's one of the shorter inauguration speeches. It comes in at just over 1,400 words. It's the shortest since Carter's way back in 77. Go back on the channel and you can watch Carter's speech. It's noted for being an unusually dark speech, quite depressive, quite somber. There's some fact-checking issues and concerns there, but hey, we're talking about Donald Trump here. He's not going to worry so much about the facts. He's going to look more at the emotions. How can he make an emotional appeal to the audience? And that is what he bases his successful electoral campaign on. Let's now look at this inauguration speech and see how he brings this all together, how he brings together that strategic visibility, how he brings together that clever rhetoric and slogans that managed to get him the appeal where it counted. Now, quick disclaimer before we start to analyze this. I do not own the rights to this video. I'm using this video for educational purposes only. This has been supplied by ABC News, and I'd like to thank them for the use of this video. Now, with those legal disclaimers out of the way, let's look at the 2017 inauguration speech of President Donald Trump. What we're seeing there is Trump building a little bit of connection leading into his speech. One of the things you've heard me talk about in other inauguration speech analyses is the importance of savoring the start and end of a speech. These 2 important bookmarks. So not coming up on the stage and rushing into what you're going to say, not finishing what you're going to say and then scurrying away again. Coming up there and holding that connection. And what Trump does, his own personal slant on this, is just that little bit of acknowledgement before he's actually doing the speech, a little thank you and the thumbs up to just start building that connection, building that rapport before he starts his speech.
In a great national effort to rebuild our country and restore its promise for all of our people.
There's this kind of rhythmic, hypnotic quality to Trump's gestures there. There's like a pattern and a rhythm to them. So there's something that's quite visually appearing and hypnotic that comes through in those gestures there. And something that I criticize many previous presidents for is not utilizing the gestures enough. When you're standing there on the podium and you don't have that movement, you don't have that same degree of body language that you can play with, really maximizing and amplifying what you do have, the facial expressions and the gestures, is something that I've seen most presidents not do. Trump really leans in to the use of gestures in this particular speech. And I'm going to highlight some more examples that I think are working, and also potentially some examples that demonstrate that it's not about gesturing for gesture's sake. It's about what effect are the gestures having. And right at the beginning there, it's almost like this attractive, hypnotic quality to the gestures, pulling the audience in and holding their attention for the speech to come.
And we are grateful to President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama for their gracious aid throughout this transition. They have been magnificent. Thank you.
A very magnanimous approach from Trump here. And something that I think really characterizes the 2016 election. The 2016 election is where the political divides, polarity that have been building for a couple decades, it's probably 2016 where they really start to come to a head. And a lot of people, both persuasions of the political spectrum, remember 2016 as being this really hostile, nasty election. And for Trump to come in here and go, okay, we may have just had a very divisive, hostile election. A lot of people very upset at the result. Ultimately, more people didn't vote for Trump than did vote for Trump. To come in, have that sense of magnanimity, be praising a president who Trump has criticized on frequent occasions leading up onto that point. It's showing being a bigger person, coming together, looking to be that leader who brings a country together. And this is something that presidents of the past have always made an acknowledgement to. But in the past, there was that little bit more civility and respect that existed between the political parties that by this point has eroded a lot more. So this sentiment has more meaning than it did in the past because it comes in an environment of increased hostility. So a very kind of classy move by Trump here. He could very easily say, haha, I'm the winner and this is what I'm going to do. But to acknowledge the previous president, not acknowledge someone who you've criticized on a frequent basis, is a presidential act. It's something that inauguration speeches are built around, of this idea of bringing together divides in the country.
Today's ceremony, however, has very special meaning because today we are not...
Trump understands optics. It's one of the things that he built his visibility, his campaigning around. What you see here is not necessarily about what he is saying in the speech. He's thinking about what the cameras are picking up. It's the visual component of the inauguration speech. Behind him right now is a military backdrop. You have military officers standing behind Trump. Those military officers are being used as a symbol of law, order, discipline, structure, respect, civility. Trump understands that he wants that backdrop to be coming in because that's what he wants people to see. It's not just about what he wants people to hear in the speech. It's understanding that this is now a cinematic experience. When I did this inauguration speech series, most inauguration speeches I have not analyzed. There are more presidents I haven't analyzed than who I have analyzed. And why haven't I analyzed any speeches before FDR in 1933? Because there were no recordings of them. You couldn't see the inauguration speech because they weren't televised. And up until this point, I think the majority of inauguration speeches have been delivered as speeches to a live in-person audience. But I think this is the first time where a president is appreciating there is not just the live in-person audience to think about, there's also the television audience to think about. The actually far larger audience are going to be watching this on camera and not watching this in person. So this is a really clever use of thinking about the optics, what Trump wants people to see in his speech and not just what he wants them to hear in his speech.
But we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
You, the people, points to the audience. So this is the transfer of power. It's handing over power. It's not saying I am the speaker with the power. It's saying you are the audience with the power. So again, a good little gesture, acknowledging the audience, involving them in the speech, making them feel like they're part of the audience. This is what I'm talking about when it comes to purposeful gestures. That gesture of giving the power back to you has a purpose and an impact on the audience when Trump delivers that line.
Starting right here and right now, because this moment is your moment, it belongs to you.
Your moment. Again, we see the same thing. It's pointing towards the audience. It's using you and your. In a speech, you're getting the balance between you, me, and we. You're talking about the audience's experience. You're establishing your credibility and authority. And then you're building the relationship and the commonality between you and the audience. And this is a flavor you've got to balance. If a speech is too much about me, people go, oh, this speaker, they're not appealing to who I am. But also a speech can be too much of you, and kind of in your face of what are you going to do with your life? What beliefs are holding you back? And it can feel very aggressive and confrontational. But getting that right flavor, involving you as the audience. And Trump is making pretty direct appeals to the audience here. Something that we've maybe seen in the past. We see presidents who kind of talk in an abstract and they say, the people of this country. Well, the people of this country are standing right in front of you. Address them directly. Trump understands the power of direct acknowledgement and address. So using the you, again, using the point as well to really direct and put that focus on the audience, it builds that connection and builds that rapport with the audience as a speaker.
Is your country.
Again, another example of it, you're seeing the same thing. Your country, it's you, it's giving it to the audience, it's involving them in the audience, it's making them feel like they are addressed and heard.
What truly matters is not which party controls our government, but whether our government is controlled by the people.
Got a nice little juxtaposition there. Juxtaposition in various different forms is what we see a lot through these presidential speeches. So it's pulling this idea that the theme that Trump is building up through this is the idea of the power isn't with the parties, it isn't with the president, it isn't with Washington. The power is all about the people. It's all about the citizens. So he's using that power juxtaposition of doing a little switcheroo, not in the ask not what your country can do for you, not that kind of direct and obvious switcheroo, but replaying with that idea of power moving from the politics into the people.
At the center of this movement is a crucial conviction that a nation exists to serve its citizens.
Crucial conviction. Nice bit of alliteration. I think alliteration is a very underutilized skill in these presidential speeches. I always think back to the Eisenhower speech. Again, go back and look on the channel. Eisenhower really employed alliteration. Again, any technique can be overused. You're not trying to alliterate every single sentence, because if you highlight everything, you highlight nothing. But it's something that I haven't really seen play enough in speeches, and it's a very simple way. The sound of it brings that attention to those key points, pulls attention, attracts attention, and it's something that you can scatter out very nicely throughout a speech, just these little sprinkles here and there. The crucial conviction. So great use of a literary technique coming in from Trump at this point.
Americans want great schools for their children, safe neighborhoods for their families, and good jobs for themselves.
So Trump follows up that little bit of alliteration. So the cruel conviction, gosh, the crucial conviction draws the attention to the beginning of the statement, and then he follows that up with the rule of three. Again, rule of three is synonymous, really, with presidential inauguration speeches. So he talks about schools, neighborhoods, jobs. People can visualize, yeah, these are the things that we want. Those are things that they can see in their mind. They can see sending off their children to school and going, this is a child where I feel that this is a school where I feel my child is going to be nurtured, they're going to be safe, they're going to be welcomed, they're going to be included. They look at their neighborhood, and again, they're looking around of, this is a neighborhood where I feel comfortable, I feel safe, I feel pleasant and joyful when I'm walking around. And then jobs. Well, jobs, again, they give me that security, they give me that purpose, they give me that meaning. So these are things that people can see in their minds. So the rule of three, again, it's pulling the audience's attention, and it's also a visual rule of three as well. The audience are seeing these things in their mind, and that's what we're really wanting to do as speakers. We're wanting to activate our audience's imagination. We're wanting to put images in their mind, because it's with those images then audience get clarity, and with that clarity they begin to understand the message and the action they're going to take as a result of hearing you speak.
Rusted out factories scattered like tombstones across the landscape of our nation.
That is incredible imagery, and I would say this is probably the best line of Trump's entire speech. It's something that's so visceral. Rusted out factories, scattered like tombstones. And again, if you think back to what I was talking about in the intro and the context for this, Trump won this election by appealing to the industrial workers who felt that they had left behind, who felt that their jobs were insecure, who felt that they weren't providing for their families in the way that they used to. And that image really speaks to that key demographic that Trump was able to win over in this campaign. It's something that's so clear to them, it's something that's so emotional to them, and when Trump paints that picture, he's demonstrating that he understands their situation. He understands the despair, he understands the resentment, he understands the frustration. It's such a powerful image, and it's such a key appeal to his audience demographic, the people who put him in this spot, the people who his campaigning was centered around and focused on. This is who I want to help, and this is who I want to appeal to. And that image just really speaks to the whole campaign strategy behind what Trump was trying to do in his presidential appeal, and who he was appealing to as a future and now current president of the United States.
And the crime, and the gangs, and the drugs that have stolen too many lives and robbed our country of so much unrealized potential.
Again, another rule of three: crime, gangs, drugs. Again, a very visual, emotive rule of three. So bringing the audience attention. This is really highlighting some key problems and some key challenges. What people are scared of, what people are feeling is a threat to their way of life. So this time the rule of three is being used, instead of the rule of three being used in an aspirational way of this is what we want, we're wanting jobs, we want neighborhoods, we're wanting schools. Now it's being used in a way to attract attention to, okay, this is what we don't want and this is what we're trying to get rid of. So 2 examples of a rule of three used so far: pulling the audience's attention, but pulling the audience's attention towards different aspects: challenges and aspirations, problems and solutions.
We will follow 2 simple rules: buy American and hire American.
This is a really catchy line. And what this line is doing is making the abstract concrete. Whenever you're presenting vision as a leader, you'll be talking about these big concepts and big ideas. And it's great to have this big picture thinking. But people have also got to understand, what does that look like for me? What does that look like in my everyday life? What are part of the actions that I need to take to make this a reality? And that's what Trump does with this line. Got a nice little bit of rhyming: buy American, hire American. But also, how do we turn this concept of make America great again? Okay, what does make America great again mean? Well, here are some rules that we're going to follow. So every time that you buy something, you go to the shops, you buy your groceries, you buy furniture for your house, you buy subscriptions to Netflix and everything else. Everything that you buy is going to be American. And then in terms of jobs, when you get hired for a job, you're going to get hired as an American. When we are building our successful businesses, those successful businesses will be built by hiring people who are American. So it's turning the abstract into something concrete. Again, it's allowing the audience to see what you're talking about, to have a vision of where you are leading them, to see the yellow brick roads, the yellow bricks on the yellow brick road that are taking them to the glorious Emerald City.
We do not seek to impose our way of life on anyone, but rather to let it shine as an example. We will shine for everyone to follow.
I really like the choreography of that, of we will shine for everyone to follow. So it's almost like, it looks like Trump is holding this ball of light, like this big light bulb. We will shine. Again, it's really positive wording, shining bright for everyone. And then he has this nice expansive gesture, and it's inclusive. It's saying, look, everyone can fit into this gesture, for everyone to follow. And then we have this more focused, honed, as if painting a path and showing a way, showing a direction. So it's this lovely choreography that comes in there. We've got the shining light, we've got the expansive, inclusive gesture of everyone, and then we've got the focused, direct, this is the path they can come down with us.
We stand at the birth of a new millennium, ready to unlock the mysteries of space, to free the earth from the miseries of disease, and to harness the energies, industries, and technologies of tomorrow. A new national pride will stir our souls, lift our sights, and heal our divisions. It's time to...
Ding, ding, ding. It's the rule of three counter again. And now we're seeing the rule of three switch back in. We saw one example of a rule of three talking about aspirations, one rule of three talking about challenges, and now we've got that rule of three that's pointing back towards not just aspirations, but also solutions as well. It's saying, when we do these things, these are the outcomes and results. And again, it's not just saying, when we do these things, we're going to be good, we're going to be better, we're going to be great. It's actually highlighting the specifics of these. It's like, okay, it's going to heal our divisions, right? Divisions is something that I see around us. I can see how me and my neighbor are not getting on how we can do. Stir our souls. You know what? Yes, like I do feel a little bit lost in life. I feel like I don't have purpose. I don't have meaning. I feel that my deity has abandoned me. Stirring our souls, that energy and that invigoration. So it's painting these outcomes, and it's not just saying things are going to be better. It's painting a vision of how things are going to be better. So whenever you're utilizing these attention grabbing techniques, things like alliteration, things like the rule of three, you've also got to think of, well, it's not just about attracting the attention. It's also think about, what am I attracting attention to? You've got to think of, what are the most important parts of my speech that I want to be attracting attention to? What are the most visual parts of your speech that you want to be attracting attention to? What are the most emotionally moving aspects of your speech that you want to be attracting attention to? That's where you turn a good speech into a great speech. It's not just using these techniques. Any idiot can open up the dictionary and say 5 words that all begin with the letter E. Any idiot can go 1, 2, 3. I've said 3 things in a row. So it's not about just using the technique. It's about understanding when to use the technique for maximum effect.
And whether a child is born in the urban sprawl of Detroit or the windswept plains of Nebraska, they look up at the same night sky, they fill their heart with the same dreams, and they are infused with the breath of life by the same almighty creator.
That's a really rich, poetic series of statements from Trump there. And what he's doing, again, is very visual, and he's appealing to different parts of America. Ultimately, the American coalition that brought him into the office, who he appealed to through his campaigning, and also ultimately the America that he's going to be leading as well. So he appeals to the urban class. He's talking about those who are living in Detroit. He's talking about rural America on the plains of Nebraska. And then he's talking about some commonalities. He uses the imagery of children. So again, children is something that we can resonate with a lot more. Children are innocent. It's less divisive to think of children than to think of adults. So children is something that brings people together, talking about some of that essence and lifeblood, the hopes and dreams, linking in that idea of religion, linking in that idea of higher meaning. So it's making this really broad appeal to ultimately the people who voted him in, and also the people who did not vote for him as well. So some really poetic, effective language coming in as we start to move towards the climax of the speech.
Together, we will make America strong again. We will make America wealthy again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And yes, together, we will make America great again. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
All of that effective marketing, messaging, slogans, campaigning, all comes towards a crescendo at the end there. We've got the tagline of Trump's candidacy and Trump's presidency. The official technique we're seeing there is anaphora, the repetition of a phrase at the start. So I always remember anaphora at the start. A for anaphora, A for at the start. Make America, and then listing off all of these positive attributes, all of these aspirational virtues, and then finishing with the tokens. You can actually see as the camera pans across the audience, you see people with their MAGA hats on, don't you? I mean, talk about effective messaging. Talk about bringing an audience into an idea and a brand. And that was really the hallmark of Trump's candidacy in this campaign, and ultimately his messaging as a president as well. We have never seen an inauguration speech where, you know, there was nobody watching JFK who had "ask not what you can do for America" baseball caps, was there? No. So Trump has got this really clear idea of his messaging coming through, who he's trying to appeal to and how he's speaking to their challenges and aspirations. And that's what we're thinking about as a speaker. As speakers, we're thinking about who are we directing our messaging towards. And I always think US presidents have a little bit of a tricky game to play with this, because they've got to make this very broad appeal to an entire country of people. And to be honest, I don't think there are many things that you can say that appeal to everyone in a country. People are nuanced. People have different challenges, different aspirations. The people who live in the urban centers of Detroit that Trump was talking about have a very different viewpoint from people who live on the plains of Nebraska. Trying to find what are the commonalities that link different people together in different parts of the country, different ages, men, women, different religious beliefs, different sexualities, different levels of education, different levels of wealth, different level. You name it. It's so hard to make that broad appeal. And I always feel that this is an area that makes it difficult for US presidents to try and get a message that appeals to everyone. And I think what we see here with Trump is, yes, he makes some of these broad appeals to try and appeal to everyone. But I think he also recognizes a little bit of, he knows he isn't going to appeal to everyone. So he then just double downs and focuses on, okay, who is it that I know I already appeal to? And who are those people who I can potentially appeal to? And that is a lesson that I think we can take away as speakers, is when you try and be everything to everyone, it really dilutes your messaging, and sometimes it means it's not as impactful and effective as it can be. Sometimes you have to accept a few losses and go, there are just some people that I'm not going to win over with this. But if I can put my time and attention into those who I do know I can appeal to, I do know I can reach, I do know I can connect with, I do know who I can impact, that is when your effectiveness as a speaker can be increased. And that's something that we can learn from how Trump constructs this inauguration speech. As I'm filming this, Trump is campaigning to be president of the United States a second time. And if he's successful in that, he's going to come up with a second inauguration speech. Now, he'll clearly want to learn from some of the lessons of his first inauguration speech. So he probably wants to watch this video and find out, okay, what really worked for me the first time I did it? And then also look at what I'm going to be delivering in just a few moments. What are some of the areas of his speech that I think could be improved? Some of the lines that didn't quite land, things that were missing from his speech. And he can learn from that and work with that in the event that he has to deliver inauguration speech rounds 2. Now, maybe that's a situation that you feel that you're in as well. There's a speech that you've delivered in the past and you're going, okay, there were the elements of that that I liked, but how can I really take that and go forward with it? Maybe there's a new office that you're aiming for. Now, not necessarily office of President of the United States, but you're wanting to make a jump up with your speaking. You're wanting to appeal to a wider audience. You want to have more of an impact with your speeches. And that's where coaching together with me can help. We'll look at your speeches, just like I'm looking at Trump's speech in this video. Look at, okay, what's really working for you? What are some good techniques that are coming through? Where is your messaging landing? And then looking at, okay, what are the areas in which you can grow and improve in your speaking? So to find out a little bit more about how coaching can help you with your speaking, I've popped a link to my LinkedIn in the video description below. If you reach out to me there, send me a message on LinkedIn, outline a little bit about what you speak on, what challenges that you are having with your speaking at the moment, what aspirations and targets are you aiming for with your speaking. We can look at some different coaching options and find the option that works best for you and your speaking. Now, let's look at the rest of Trump's inauguration speech and find out how he could make this speech great again.
Chief Justice Roberts, President Carter, President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, fellow Americans, and people of the world, thank you.
We see the roll call here, and the roll call is something that we've seen in previous presidential speeches, and it's something that I've always criticized. It's this very boring, ceremonial, formulaic way to bring people into speech. And it's often one of the first things that gets said when it's utilized. And for me, Trump has positioned himself as the unconventional president, someone who's the Washington outsider, someone who's got to come in and do things differently. And when literally the first line of his speeches are this ceremonial, ritualistic run through of attendees, I think he had such a better opportunity to come out and start with a bang and really showcase himself as someone who is a little bit contrarian. This really just sounds like the kind of 1950s era of inauguration speeches, and I think Trump has really missed an opportunity to come out the blocks with a bang.
While the people have borne the cost. Washington flourished, but
we see that Trump there, he either didn't think he was going to get an applause break, or he thought he was. Either way, what he got was a half applause break, which was not the desired result in either of those scenarios. And you can just see Trump there's this moment of hesitation. He doesn't quite know, should I try and milk the applause break, or should I just go through and say my next line? And what I'd say there is anytime that you have that applause come in, always just allow that extra space to see if you can milk the applause. The same comes with humor in speeches, actually. Sometimes when you deliver a line, it takes people a few seconds to catch up. And actually, if you look at research into how we process different senses in the brain, we process sight very quickly. Like we see a ball coming towards our face and whew, we're ducking. But actually we process audio a little bit slower. It shows it can take sometimes as much as 2 seconds for us to process a sound. And that's why, sometimes someone says a joke and they start saying something else, and then you get the joke when they're already halfway through the next sentence. That can happen when we're delivering a speech as well. So when you have that moment, just hold the silence a little bit more, and often you can draw that reaction, you can draw the applause break, you can draw the humor from a joke. And I think Trump panics and hurries here when he can milk that moment and savor it before moving on to his next line.
the establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country. Their victories have not been your victories. Their triumphs have not been your triumphs. And while they celebrated in our nation's capital, there
could have had one more there, couldn't we? Would have been a nice little bit of a rule of three. Would have been a repetition of juxtaposition. Try saying that with a mouthful of peanut butter. That, I think, would have been this really strong rhetorical device of painting the contrast between power and the people, which is a theme that Trump built his campaign on, and a theme that he's trying to develop in this speech. And that would have been a fantastic example. Their triumphs, their victories have not been your triumphs, your victories. And there are so many other good examples that could have been used as a third example. And I think Trump just missed an opportunity to really latch onto this, bringing together a rule of three, bringing together a juxtaposition, and ultimately painting the picture of what he stands for and what he stands against. He is standing against the power in Washington, and he is standing for the power of the people. Let's hear that in the rhetoric. Let's hear that really emphasized and hammered home. And I think that would have been a perfect example to bring in the rule of three. There was lots of good things that could have been brought in as that third example, and just a missed opportunity has gone by there.
forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
You see that image there? The boom that Trump is using, I think, is a poorly chosen boom. And remember I said earlier about Trump really has an idea of the optics of what he's doing here. It's not just about the speech, it's about what you're seeing. But here I think the optics have been really missed out. Plenty of times through this visual, Trump's face goes behind the boom, and it takes away some of that facial cues. And facial cues are such an important part of body language, such an important part of expressing emotion. And so I think stylistically, we needed to have a different type of microphone here. This big boom is obstructing some of the facial expression. It's almost acting like a barrier of connection in between the speaker and the audience. And this is something to be mindful of when we're speakers, is looking at our setup, looking at our speaking space. If you do find yourself in this kind of fixed microphone position, which I don't think speakers should be in, to be honest, but if you do find yourself there, having this great big moon orbiting the planet of your face is a barrier between you and the audience. I'll be looking at that microphone could be that size rather than that size, or it could be positioned just lower down so that the camera is picking up the entire face without any barriers. So a bit of a tech adjustment. For the United States of America, I think we can have some better tech than this big old-fashioned microphone sitting in front of his face.
We are one nation, and their pain is our pain. Their dreams are our dreams, and their success will be our success. We share one heart.
Here we see that great example of the rule of three. Their hour, their hour, their hour. And remember, that draws back to what I was saying earlier. I think this could have been a fantastic opportunity to bring more contrast between the two. Trump could have called back to having that previous rule of three talk about Washington. Their successes have not been your successes. Their triumphs not been your triumphs. So then he could have set up the villain of the speech. And here he could then have a callback of saying, this is how we redistribute things. Theirs will be ours. Theirs will be ours. And that would have been a great narrative loop, anchoring together different parts of the speeches. And this, when we're thinking of our speeches as speakers, we're thinking about how the techniques we use at the start of a speech build into and inform what we do later in the speech. And actually, this is something that stand-up comedians understand really well. They understand that humor isn't just about the one-off throwaway punchline. You rarely get a big laugh just from a boom boom ch line. The big laughs come from building a narrative, building a theme throughout a set. And they understand the importance of callbacks. They understand how you set something up in the beginning and you use that to fuel what you do later in the speech. And here was an opportunity where Trump could have done that, but he didn't tie his speech together. It was two separate points that didn't end up getting linked. And so the speech starts to break apart, almost like train carriages that aren't properly connected together. Yes, they're all sort of going in the same general direction, but they're not all conjoined and pulling together in that same direction. So I think that would have been a fantastic way to create some symmetry and callback in the speech. And again, just a missed opportunity. Even though this standalone rule of three was executed well, I think there was so much more that could be done with this.
The oath of office I take today is an oath of allegiance to all Americans.
I've talked about Trump's gestures so far, and I've highlighted good examples of the gestures. But I think Trump's overall use of gestures is a little bit mixed. And it comes back to the message I gave in the beginning. It's not gestures for gestures' sake. It's thinking about the purpose of the gestures and the response of the gestures. Earlier on, I talked about how Trump's gestures have been quite inclusive, quite welcoming, quite directed towards the audience. It's coming back to you. It's going to be your country. So all of that is very much like, this is for you. It's very much giving of the gifts. But when Trump goes, all Americans, that's an inclusive gesture. That is saying you are the in group and it's excluding all Americans. So I found that a bit of a strange gesture to be using. All Americans, Well, look how small that circle is. This isn't all Americans, or even better, would have been a nice expansive all Americans. It's all Americans. It's saying, actually, who I really care about is actually just you and not you. That's what that gesture says. So that gesture, I think, has actually contradicted the words coming out of Trump's mouth. And what we want our gestures to be is an extension of what we're saying. So if we see a gesture of is going to be for all Americans, well, that is an extension of the words. But when it comes down to all Americans, that's when the body language is no longer congruent with the words. And that's when you're then going to get a response from the audience of going, oh, wait. It'll be that kind of funny feeling in the pit of the stomach that you can't always explain, but you suddenly go, I don't know if this person's really speaking to me. I don't know if this is a person I see myself in. And you might not necessarily be able to explain why, but it can often be because there's that lack of congruence between the words that they're saying and how they're expressing them on stage.
One by one, the factories shuttered and left our shores, with not even a thought about the millions and millions of American workers that were left behind. The wealth
Again, back to the gestures. And honestly, like, look, I can keep on
of our middle
playing
class has been ripped from their homes, and then
You see how repetitive that gesture is? We've kind of, number one, it doesn't match. Trump begins by going one by one. That's not one by one. That's 3 by 3. And then we get a this and a this and a this. That gesture isn't doing anything. It isn't matching the statement. It's something that's become repetitive. Do you remember early on I talked about at the beginning, it was quite this sort of hypnotic gesture. It was almost drawing the audience in. At that point, it had some purpose. But what we're seeing here is it's just this hand that's flailing around. I need to do different things with my hand. The gesture isn't adding anything to the words. And this is what I mean by purposeful gestures. So it's not just when you're at a podium, you've got to gesture a lot, because I watched this video by David and he said gesture a lot. The gestures have to have purpose. They have to be adding something to the words that you're saying. And if they're not adding something to the words that you're saying, then you'd be better not gesturing at all.
but that is the past. And now we are looking only to the future.
At this point, we have just crossed the halfway point of the speech. And Trump said, this is the past, we're talking about the future. But I think there's a massive part of this speech that is totally missed out. Considering Trump has built his campaign around Make America Great Again, he spent half of his speech and he has not talked at all about what made America great in the first place. The slogan is not Make America Great. The slogan Make America Great is the idea that America has never been great and we're trying to push ourselves and aspire to something we haven't been to before. That's not Trump's slogan. It's Make America Great Again. And what all presidential speeches have done is they've always tapped into this old world, new world. We talk about it a lot, the idea of these are the traditions and the virtues and the values that America is built on. And this is what we can draw upon going into the challenges and the aspirations of the future. One of the reasons why this speech has been criticized, and I think pretty fairly in this regard, Trump has painted this really despondent, dour vision of the past. But he hasn't talked about any of the highlights. If he's saying, okay, we're going to make America great again, tell us what made it great in the first place. And there's loads of things, there's loads of examples that you could pull upon. Pull upon all the stuff that previous Americans have done. The wars, the innovations, the unity, the courage, the coming together, the aspiration, the entrepreneurship. Great, we're talking about a business person here, right? You'd expect him to lean into that sense of innovation and entrepreneurship and aspiration. But up until this point, there is no description of what makes America great? So what are you drawing upon to make America great again? It's a huge misstep in this speech. And considering that is the entire slogan, that's the entire thing he builds the speech around, at no point in the speech so far has he talked about make America great again. He hasn't even talked about what made America great in the first place, what's going to make it great in the future. And that would be a misstep for any president, but especially for a president whose entire slogan is talking about revitalizing the good aspects of the past. All that Trump has talked about until this moment is all of the crap stuff that has been happening in the past. The people who've been left behind, how the power has been unevenly distributed, all of these aspects. And it's not that you can't touch upon those aspects. You've got to meet people where they are. You've got to talk about the challenges that are affecting them. But he doesn't provide the flip side of that either. It's all darkness and challenge, and not a whole lot of light and aspiration, which again, considering he's the unconventional president, considering he has this entire slogan based around greatness, we're halfway through the speech and very little painting of the picture of greatness has actually come in at this point. And there's still not a whole lot of it that's going to come in the rest of the speech either. So this, I would say, is Trump's biggest mistake with this speech, that he talks about making America great again, but he forgot to talk about what makes America great in the first place.
And unite the civilized world against radical Islamic terrorism, which we will eradicate completely from the face of the earth.
Really destructive language here. And if you remember from the last inauguration speech we looked at, looking at Obama's inauguration speech, he said, people will judge their leaders on what they're able to create and not what they destroy. And I think that sentiment comes through really strong here, that a mark of leadership, of great leadership, is talking about what you're going to create. Trump is talking about, we're going to make America great again. He's talking about, here are the challenges that people have. Here's how your lives are bad. Here's how you've been left behind. And all of these sentiments are true. But instead of talking about, here's what we're going to create, here's how we're going to make your life better, here's the jobs we're going to bring in, here's the safety we're going to bring to our neighborhoods, here's how we're going to improve the education system, here's how we're going to make our infrastructure better, here's how we're going to utilize technology. Instead of talking about, here's the things we're going to create to make your life better, he's instead focusing on, this is what we're going to destroy. Okay, it's not that terrorism is a great thing and we want it to be in the world, but focusing on destroying something isn't what makes people's lives better. So it's very destructive language. And also, there's prejudice in this, right? We're going to eradicate Islamic terrorism. Not terrorism. Not all of the different veins of terrorism. This one aspect specifically. It's race baiting, isn't it? It's using that fear of the other, and it's focusing on the fear of the other. It's fear-based language and destructive-based language rather than aspiration-based language and creative-based language. And let me come up and play an extra little clip that comes in very soon after he's made this statement, and look at how these two statements match, or more precisely, do not match.
When you open your heart to patriotism, there is no room for prejudice.
At 11:45 in this video, the timestamp, Trump talks about eradicating Islamic terrorism, singles out a religion. At 12:20, less than 30 seconds later, he talks about there being no room for prejudice. He contradicts himself in the space of 30 seconds, doesn't he? He singles out a religion, and then he talks about being open-minded and not singling out people based on all sorts of different factors, including religion. So there's this discrepancy. So remember I said with the gestures of, when you have an all Americans, the words don't match the gesture. There's incongruence there. And what we're also seeing here is incongruence in the language, that some of the language is talking about being very inclusive and opening. Let's give power back to all citizens. This is for all Americans. And then the language contradicts itself. But this is who we're going to target and focus on. But we're not going to be prejudiced, but we're going to target and focus on these particular people. So you can also have incongruence in different parts of the speech, the different words, the different statements. And considering these come right back to back, they're not even at different parts of the speech where maybe people wouldn't be so aware of them. They are literally one idea that follows the next, and the next idea is contradicting what was said in the previous idea. So we're starting to see some incongruence between what Trump is saying and how he's expressing it, and even seeing incongruence in two direct ideas that are put next to each other.
The Bible tells us how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. We must...
Okay, the Bible tells us it's good and pleasant. Can you give an example? Can you give a story that brings that idea to life? Can you say a quote or a passage that really crystallizes that idea? It sounds like an AI summary of the Bible. What's the Bible all about? The Bible it talks about being good and pleasant when all of God's people live together and get along. It's right, okay. It's this vague, wishy-washy statement. It kind of sounds like someone who hasn't read the Bible, or someone who's got ChatGPT, tell me some things about the Bible. When you're communicating ideas to the audience, you have to crystallize these ideas. You have to bring them to life. You have to create images in the audience's mind. And we saw that earlier in the speech, Trump was creating images, talking about the rusted out factories being tombstones. That is a really evocative, clear image that comes to the audience's mind. When we hear the phrase, the Bible tells us it's good and pleasant, how? Who? What? There's no image that comes to mind with that. So it's this dead kind of generic statement that doesn't add anything to the point. You need to crystallize your points, bring out the anecdotes, bring out the metaphors, bring out the quotage in the scripture, bring that statement to life so the audience can see it and feel it along with you.
Finally, we must think big and dream even bigger. In America,
Now we're starting to hear some aspirational positive language. This is time-stamped at 13:30. This is going towards the end of the speech. We're well over like 2/3, maybe even 3/4 of the speech. I remember I said earlier, we reached that halfway point and it was like all doom and gloom. This is how things are wrong. This is despair. The whole branding of Make America Great, we want that theme of greatness to be coming through. And it's only starting to trickle in here at the end. Think big, dream bigger. Fantastic. This is the type of aspirational language we wanted to hear early on. We wanted to hear this kind of JFK language of we choose to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And Trump said that one of his kind of, not role models necessarily, one of the kind of inspirations for how he was approaching his inauguration speech was JFK. It was JFK and Reagan, basically, were the two presidents that he drew upon. So where was that aspirational JFK language? When your theme is greatness, build your speech around thinking great ideas, great actions. And we're only starting to see that type of rhetoric trickle in here at the end, when really that's something we should be starting to get a kind of stratospheric, let's think big picture, big dreams, big aspiration. And so much of that is what the American culture and persona is all about. When you're talking about make America great again, what made America great in the first place? It is that innovation, it is that aspiration, it is that pioneering spirit. So why haven't we heard about that in the speech before? Why aren't we hearing about it now? Why can't we hear more about what makes America great in the first place? So again, this idea of the greatness and the good aspects of America just aren't making it into this speech nearly enough as what they should be.
We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And yes, together, we will make America great again. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
Now don't worry, this isn't a repeat clip. I want to come back to this. So I praised this, talking about the energy, talking about the anaphora, talking about basically the branding and the messaging that was coming through here. I actually want to come back to this because as well as praising it, I'm also going to critique it. The reason why I'm going to critique it is this was the only moment of the speech where I felt this idea of greatness really come through. This sort of rousing, inspiring greatness. And this, I think, needed to be through the entire rest of the speech. As I said, Trump has built this infusive, immersive branding. It's the best branding that any US president has had. This Make America Great Again. As you can see, people there, the red baseball caps, the banding. It's something that has been so sort of pervasive and has really gotten through to people who buy into the idea. And I think he's got to draw upon that as a strength in the speech. But all of that kind of clever marketing and branding and messaging and rhetoric, which we saw throughout his campaign, which allowed him to get all of that free airtime, that allowed him to be so pervasive, that allowed him to connect with people's challenges and struggles, he doesn't use that to build the foundations of the rest of his speech. So when he comes into this final idea of we're going to make America proud, we're going to make America strong, all of these great ideas, they should have been throughout the speech. And if he'd scattered it of, here's the reason why we are not safe right now, here are the challenges that we're experiencing, and this is what we can do to change it. This is what we've done to make ourselves safe in the past, and this is how we're going to make ourselves safe in the future. If we're talking about being wealthy again, well, this is the challenges we're experiencing with wealth right now. This is what we've done to build our wealth in the past, and this is what we're going to do to build our wealth in the future. So creating that contrast, using the branding that's already there, he's already built up this idea and this messaging, and structuring the speech around that. Instead, we've just had this dark doom and gloom of talking about all of the challenges, but none of the solutions and aspirations, or not none, but they're coming through so scattered. Having the contrast of not great and great throughout the entire speech, it speaks to people's challenges and struggles. It shows an understanding, it shows an awareness, but then lift them up into that idea of greatness, create the big picture thinking, send them off on a crescendo. And we do have this crescendo right at the end, but instead of it being like this staircase of building the energy and building the hype to, launching off into space at the end, what we have is this kind of big flat line that has a couple of peaks here and there, and then it lifts off at the end. But when you're only lifting off at the end, there's only so high you can go. You've only got so much time to build into that. But if that had been built in throughout the speech, this could be a massive send-off at the end, really ending on that idea of greatness, building into this is the great direction that we're going in. So although I think this was well executed when you just look at it in isolation, when you actually look across the entire speech, you realize what a missed opportunity there was, because this type of energy, this type of messaging, this type of catchy, emotional response in the audience could have been present throughout the whole speech, and it could have been much better built around this key idea. And will we see that if Trump becomes president again? I guess we'll have to see. I think what we can learn from this is Trump as a president, both as a presidential candidate and as president, has probably hit the nail on the head in terms of catchy marketing, messaging, and slogans. Has done that better than pretty much any other presidential candidate. Being able to take big ideas, big concepts, and strong, vague feelings and making them really concrete and tangible. And we saw a lot of that in his campaigning, but I think we missed a lot of that in this inauguration speech. So Trump can do it because we saw him do it in the campaigning, but when it came time to the speech, it was as if he thought he had to do something completely different, or he ran out of ideas, or God knows, I wasn't part of writing the speech, I wasn't sitting there in the room. But I think in this inauguration speech, I don't think we saw Trump, the candidate, and all those clever rhetorical devices and all that clever messaging that he had used as a candidate really feed into this presidential speech. And that's something that we can learn as speakers as well, is use your winners of the past and build them into your speeches of the future. If you have things that work in the past, don't go, okay, well, that was cool. I used it, it worked. And now I have to come up with like completely new stuff. No, build upon the foundations of what works. to again, use a bit of a tangential example here. Stand-up comedians really understand this. So when people are first trying out a stand-up set, they'll try out some material, they'll maybe get one joke that gets a decent laugh, and they go, all right, okay, fantastic. I'm now going to use that joke as my opening joke. And then I'm going to work on some more material. Okay, at least I know my opener works. And then they'll get another joke that gets a decent laugh, and they go, all right, fantastic. That would now be my closing joke. I've got two things that I know are winners, and I'm going to keep on testing material to find out how I make an entire set that's good and not just have one standout moment. That's what we need to do as speakers as well. We are always testing our material when we deliver speeches. And when we find winners, when we find stuff that works, don't say, okay, well, now I've used it and that's it, gone and done. Bring that into the future, grow and expand upon that. And when you get that clear messaging and branding and marketing, the way that Trump has done with Make America Great Again, make sure you work that into everything that you're doing, because that's going to make your speeches stand out. That's going to help your speeches to reach people, and that's going to help your speeches impact their lives.